Good morning. Welcome to our video briefing. I don't even know what to call this. Lecture-ish kind of thing over chapters 1 through 4 of Frankenstein. So by now you've read those and hopefully you have gotten a lot of good information out of them, enjoyed the read. A few things I just want to point out to make sure that you've got as we move forward through the novel. First, chapter 1, I am by birth a Genovese. He is from Switzerland, right? So this novel, a lot of it takes place in Switzerland, which was, of course, where Mary Shelley was when she started writing the novel. So Victor is Swiss. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. We get a lot of his family history in chapters 1 and 2. Primarily, we get that he's got these wonderful parents that love him so much. They're great parents. Very quickly into chapter 1, he says that he was their child, whose future lot it was in their hands to direct to happiness or misery, according as they fulfilled their duties towards me. We want to mark that passage. So go ahead and find that passage in chapter 1 and mark it so that we can come back to this. Victor is making a pretty clear statement about parental responsibility here, that parents do have this responsibility to their children to either direct them to happiness or misery according to how they fulfill their duties. So we're going to want to come back to this as we go through the novel. We find out in these chapters that he has a younger brother, and this brother's name is William. William is younger than Victor by 7 years. We find out also that he has this cousin, Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth was this waif who Victor's parents rescued from this terrible life, and they felt this obligation to her, so they bring her to live with them. What I think is important to note is that Elizabeth is brought in as a plaything for Victor, as a gift for Victor. This is how Victor's mother introduces Elizabeth to him. This is how Victor views Elizabeth. Now, of course, they're kind of betrothed, and the mother on her deathbed says, I want you to get married, and so there's that. But, where is Elizabeth's autonomy within here? That's something we want to think about, too. And also, what does this do to a young child to present him with this gift of a human being who essentially belongs to him? So how does that affect Victor's view of humanity? We're also introduced to Henry Clerval, who is Victor's BFF, and he and Henry just get along famously, and we'll see Henry come back in the subsequent chapters as well. He figures prominently into the story. So keep in mind these characters as we move through the novel. I want to also draw your attention to chapter 3, whenever Victor goes to school in Ingolstadt, and how he expects to go to college and everyone is going to recognize just how brilliant he is, and instead he's kind of made fun of for his previous studies as being outdated and things that are no longer relevant in the scientific community. So notice how he doesn't abandon his beliefs. He's almost strengthened by this rejection. And he sort of goes into his own scientific study. And he's not dissuaged from what he has thought to be true. One of the things that we want to notice, too, is in chapter 4. There are a few of these. In chapter 4, he talks about the concept of inspiration. And I just think this is a beautiful way that Mary Shelley puts this. This is a couple pages into chapter 4. In the midst of this darkness, a sudden light broke in upon me, a light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, that while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius who had directed their inquiries towards the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. This is a brilliant description of inspiration. When we figure out how to do something or we understand something, it seems like, well, how could everyone not already have thought this? So I just think that's a beautiful way that she describes inspiration. He talks about that he questions whether or not he should move forward with creating a human. But he eventually, of course, decides to. A couple of things I want to point out in chapter 4 is just the macabre nature of this research. He refers to everything as materials, but of course we know what those materials are, right? I mean, they're body parts. They're dead body parts. He talks about collecting and arranging these body parts, the horrors of his secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay. I collected bones from charnel houses and disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame. He realizes this is despicable, yet he continues anyway. The slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials. So this idea that he is dabbling in something really gross and recognizing it, yet moving forward anyway, I don't know. I just think it's fascinating. He does talk about how a human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. And I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know. I wonder what you think of this. This is a point we would be discussing if we were in class, and this is part of what our response activity will focus on. Do we agree with that statement? Should we be disturbed in our tranquility in the pursuit of knowledge? He also says at the very end of this chapter, I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines or any other unwholesome trade than an artist occupied by his favorite employment. I don't know if y'all have ever been around an artist who is in the process of creation. I have, and it's not a pretty sight. It's not a peaceful, tranquil sight. A lot of times there is this kind of almost doomed by slavery to toil on this artwork as it's being created. So this is another place that I'm not exactly sure. Aren't artists, when they are in the throes of creation, isn't it kind of harsh and kind of ugly? Kind of obsessing and like a moving toward obsession? So I don't know how I feel about that. It's interesting. So those are the few things that I really want to make sure that you get in here. And then we will come back, of course, to several things that he says in these chapters and what the parent's responsibility is and what the nature of creation is. We'll come back to those things as we progress through the novel. As always, if y'all have any questions, let me know, and I will see you soon.